My name is Peyton. I'm 32 years old, living in Seattle, and I work as an investment director for an international financial fund. My life has always revolved around numbers, billion-dollar deals and contracts where even the smallest error is unacceptable. But no calculation could have prepared me for the day my own family quietly sold the only house that was legally under my name. That day, I had just walked out of a $40 million investment meeting when I received a message from the bank. Transaction confirmed. Property at 1247 Lakeshore Avenue sold for $512,000. I froze in the parking lot, heart pounding. That wasn't just a house. It was the place I grew up in, the one I'd sworn I'd always keep for myself. I had never signed any sale agreement. I had never authorized anyone to list it. I called my lawyer immediately. His response made my blood run cold. They forged a power of attorney. And they were none other than my biological mother, my stepfather, and my half-sister. Have you ever had something precious stolen from you by the very people who claim to be your family? Have you ever woken up to realize you were nothing more than a walking wallet in their eyes? If you've ever been betrayed by your own blood, share your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you've ever suffered in silence. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel to follow the rest of this story, because it's only just beginning. I was born in a small town in southern Oregon, the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked and Sunday evenings meant family dinners. My father died in an accident when I was just 6. From then on, my mother, Linda, raised me alone until she remarried Frank, a man who brought a new last name into the house, and a daughter from his previous marriage, Chloe. I grew up in a 3-bedroom wooden house with peeling walls, unreliable hot water, and a fridge that was always close to empty. But I never complained because I knew there was only one way out: education. I studied every chance I could. I borrowed books from the library, replayed lectures on an old cassette player, and did so many practice tests the pages tore. While my friends were at prom, I sat in the corner of my room with a hand-me-down laptop from school. I earned a full-ride scholarship to the University of Washington and supported myself by working part-time in the student office and waitressing on weekends. Later, I got my master's degree in finance and landed a job at a small investment firm in Seattle. By 29, I became the youngest investment director in their history. I moved into a small downtown apartment and started sending money home every month. I never demanded gratitude. I did it because I could, and because my mother couldn't. But over time, the calls home shifted from, "How are you doing?" to "Frank slipped in the backyard, the doctor says he needs an MRI," or "Chloe lost her job again, she's in crisis, can you help her out?" And sometimes, "I didn't want to tell you, but the bank says they'll repossess the car if I don't pay this month." At first, I didn't question it. I wired the money, paid directly into their accounts. I told Chloe to keep going to school and that I'd cover her tuition. But then the requests kept growing. Dental bills, home repairs, a new laptop because the old one can't open Zoom anymore. And I just kept paying, quietly. Chloe acted like a trust fund kid dropped into a middle-class family. She spent money like autumn leaves in the wind: clothes, beauty products, spa days, private yoga lessons. Every time I visited, she talked about her time working at a luxury decor store, yet never lasted more than 3 months anywhere. When I asked, she'd just laugh. "I'm still finding something that aligns with my energy." Linda had the sweetest syrupy voice when she needed something, and the sharpest vinegar tone when I delayed sending money. Frank played the role of the innocent middleman, constantly repeating, "I just do what your mom asks." Even though it was my childhood home, I always felt like a stranger there. The last time I visited was for Thanksgiving last year. Chloe had just returned from a trip to Tulum, showing off dinner photos by the beach, and Linda whispered to me as we were cleaning dishes, "Frank's 60th is coming up. If you could help with a little something." I smiled without replying. I covered that entire dinner bill, along with a nearly $50 pie no one touched. I never told them I was renting a studio in Seattle with sky-high rent just to be close to the office. That I ate instant noodles 3 times a week, wore last year's suits, and hadn't taken a proper vacation in 4 years. Most recently, Chloe announced she was engaged to Tyler, a businessman in renewable energy. She looked radiant in the engagement photos, the diamond ring catching the sunset like something out of a magazine. I sent her a congratulatory text. She replied, "Thanks, sis. We're thinking of Napa Valley for the wedding. An outdoor ceremony, live music, Imported flowers from Italy. Mom says you might be able to help out a bit. You might be able to help out a bit. Such a simple sentence. One this family had become far too comfortable using. That night I checked my bank account. I was still financially stable, but the feeling of being treated like a human ATM machine was eating away at every last part of me. I didn't blame Chloe for being naive. I blamed myself for letting them think I had no limits. And then came the bank message. Transaction confirmed. Property at 1247 Lakeshore Avenue sold for $512,000. I read it 3 times. That property was the first condo I ever bought after being promoted. I once slept on the floor there because I couldn't afford a bed. I celebrated my 30th birthday there, just me, a cupcake, and a cheap bottle of wine. After I moved into the studio closer to work, I never sold it. I kept it to rent out. But I had never authorized anyone to manage it, let alone sell it. I immediately called Adam, my personal attorney. He was silent for a few seconds, then said, "Peyton, they used a fake power of attorney. The signature doesn't match. But if we don't act fast, the buyer could make the transaction legally binding." Who did this? I asked, though deep down I already knew. Adam spoke slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. The petitioner for the power of attorney was Frank. With a medical affidavit from Linda, stating that you were undergoing psychiatric treatment in California and unable to sign documents. Chloe is listed as the main contact. Nothing else needed to be said. I sat there in my empty office on the 23rd floor, staring at the sunset bleeding across the glass buildings. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to scream. But more than anything, part of me turned cold. They crossed a line they can't come back from. And what they don't know is, I've been preparing for this moment for a very long time. I sat still in my office, the last light of day casting a strange yellow silence across the hardwood floors. The glass walls around me seemed to shrink, pressing in, squeezing the air from my lungs bit by bit. The email from the bank was still there, its subject line cutting through the screen like a knife. Transaction confirmed. Property at 1247 Lakeshore Avenue sold for $512,000. I never sold that home. Never authorized anyone to touch it. So who did? And how? I called Adam. He's one of the few people I trust completely in the legal world. We met when I first started out in finance, and in the past 8 years he's never let me fall into legal trouble. On the other end of the line, his voice was steady and deep. "I'm pulling up your property records now. Hold on, Peyton." I could hear furious typing through the phone, along with my own shallow breathing. My hand gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Every second stretched into hours. Then Adam exhaled slowly, like he had just seen something he didn't like. "There's a power of attorney on file, Peyton. Notarized. Submitted 2 weeks ago." "That's not possible." I practically hissed the words. "I didn't sign anything." "I know. And here's the strange part. The signature doesn't fully match the ones I have on file. It's close, but the final loop is slightly off. Like someone familiar with your style tried to mimic it." "Where was it filed from?" "Town of Forest Hill, Jackson County, Oregon. The real estate firm is Cascade Realty." I cut him off. "Cascade Realty. The company is owned by Greg Sanders, Frank's best friend." Adam fell silent. I went on, my voice low. "The last time I saw Greg was at his second wedding. I remember clearly. He had his arm around Frank, laughing loudly, and said, 'Family is where money doesn't need a signature.'" "I can file a request to track the transaction," Adam said. "But if the money's already in the buyer's hands, you'll need to petition the court for an emergency injunction to freeze the asset." "Do it," I said without hesitation. "There's one more thing." Adam hesitated. "The copy of the ID attached to the power of attorney document includes a photo, but it's blurry. It's an Oregon driver's license, number CM 7865, matches your old file. I switched to Washington 3 years ago. Then someone either held on to the original or forged it." I hung up after Adam promised to email the file within the hour. Right after, I opened my laptop and logged into Cedar Ridge LLC's property management system, the company I'd created to privately hold several real estate assets, including that house. The ownership file hadn't been updated yet, which meant if I acted quickly, I could still intercept the deal before the title transfer was finalized. I pulled up the security camera feed connected to the monitoring system at the Lakeshore Avenue house. The screen showed an empty balcony, the living room lights off, no sign of intruders. No one had moved in yet. I leaned back in my chair, eyes to the ceiling, and let the memories wash over me. I bought that house when I was 28. It took 3 years to pay off, including 6 months of plumbing repairs. It was the place I lived through sleepless nights with ledgers open across the table, through silent breakups, through collapsing onto the couch after 16-hour shifts. It wasn't just bricks and concrete. It was proof that I had clawed my way out of a chaotic childhood and built something with my own hands. And now they'd sold it like it was some old junk from a garage sale. I checked my phone. A message from Chloe popped up like a slap to the face. "Hey sis, I just put down the deposit on the wedding venue. Thank you so much. Mom said you'd already approved it." I almost cried seriously. I didn't reply. I called. Chloe picked up after 3 rings, her voice chipper like nothing in her life had ever gone wrong. "Hey. I was just about to call you. I know you've been busy, but great news. Tyler agreed to invite the whole extended family." Chloe. Kept my tone even and cold. "Where did you get the money for the deposit?" From the house, right? The one you weren't using anymore? Mom said you'd signed it over to Frank last year. I never signed anything," I cut in. "And that house isn't in my name. It belongs to my company. You all just sold property belonging to a legal entity, without consent from its rightful owner. Do you realize that's illegal?" There was silence. I thought you were okay with it. Mom said you didn't want the house anymore, and that Frank had authority to handle it for you. No one has the right to sign on someone else's behalf unless there's a legally notarized power of attorney. And you believed some scribbled paper with an old ID photo from 3 years ago was legal. I don't know the legal stuff. Then maybe you should start learning. Because I just contacted my lawyer. And everyone involved in this is going to have to explain themselves in court. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hand trembled, but my mind was crystal clear. I knew I'd just stepped into a war. But I also knew I wasn't that 18-year-old girl anymore, sitting at the kitchen table, dropping pennies into a jar to buy textbooks. I took the earliest flight from Seattle back to Oregon the next morning. No luggage. No notice. Just a handbag, a file folder, and a cold stillness in my chest. I didn't tell Adam I was going, but I knew he was quietly moving everything forward from his office in Seattle. Right before I boarded, I got his final message. "The court will hold an emergency hearing tomorrow afternoon. I've filed to freeze the transaction account from the house sale. Don't tip your hand until we have the order." I didn't reply. I just stared at the message, clutched the phone, and tucked it into my coat pocket. The rental car drove me through familiar backroads, past endless cornfields, past the old church where I went to Sunday school at 12. Everything looked peaceful, gentle, unchanged. And that's what made my throat tighten. Because in this picture-perfect town, someone had forged my signature, sold my home, and used the money to throw a luxurious party I hadn't even been invited to. When the car pulled up to the gates of Forest Pines, the fanciest resort for 70 miles, I felt a bitter sting in my chest. In the golden afternoon light, I saw familiar silhouettes. My mother in a burgundy dress, chatting with an older woman who looked like family from Dad's side. Frank stood in the corner, champagne glass in hand, laughing. And Chloe, my younger sister, stepped out from the lobby in a cream silk dress, holding a bouquet of white roses like she was ready to walk the aisle. I stepped out of the car. No one noticed me at first. I walked straight into the lobby, past a server holding a tray of cocktails, and stopped in front of a sign at the ballroom entrance. Chloe Tyler's engagement celebration. Honored guests welcome. Honored guests. But not me. My mother saw me first. Her expression froze for less than a second before shifting into perfect surprise. "Peyton? When did you get in?" She stepped forward, arms out as if to hug me. I stepped back half a foot. "Guess you didn't expect me to show up." "Makes sense, didn't exactly get an invite." She chuckled awkwardly. "I thought Frank had called you, maybe he forgot." "Frank doesn't forget details when money's involved," I said, my eyes never leaving his champagne glass. Frank turned. When he saw me, he stopped mid-sentence, lips moving but no sound. I brushed past my mother and walked straight to him. Frank, I want to know why your name is on the documents selling off a property that legally belongs to my company. He tried to regain composure, but his fingers gripped the glass stem too tightly. Peyton, calm down. This is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I raised an eyebrow. Forging my signature. Using a fake ID. Falsifying medical records. And withdrawing $500,000 from my company's asset. That's a misunderstanding. Chloe walked up just then. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful, like she was commenting on the party decorations. Come on, sis, you're blowing this out of proportion. You weren't using the house. You've got like $1 million. What's a little for the sake of family happiness? I turned to her. Chloe looked beautiful, put together, her makeup flawless. But there wasn't a hint of remorse in her eyes. I have money, I said slowly, because I worked 16-hour days for over a decade. And you? You stole someone else's money to throw a wedding, and called it for family? My mother cut in, her voice rising. Peyton, why are you talking like you're some outsider? Didn't you buy that house with the bonus from your first investment fund? That came from your family's support. Didn't it? I stood still for a moment, feeling a heavy weight on my chest. Then I nodded. Thanks for the reminder, Mom. It was those years I had to scrub dishes in silence because I was afraid of getting yelled at. It was working 3 jobs to cover Frank's hospital bills while no one bothered to check on me. And it was being constantly compared to the little princess who couldn't hold down a job for more than 3 months. That gave me the motivation to get away from that house. The room fell dead silent. A few guests started glancing around. Frank awkwardly set his champagne glass down on a nearby table, his voice suddenly much lower. Peyton, this isn't the place to bring all that up. I pulled a folder from my jacket pocket and placed it on the table. Good. Because we'll be discussing this in court. Linda's face turned pale. Chloe took half a step back. I didn't need to explain anything more. I left them with just one final line before I turned and walked away. Money doesn't fall from the sky. And neither does trust. I walked out of the resort without looking back. But I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. Faces draining of color, whispers rising among guests who thought they were attending a glamorous engagement party, without realizing they'd just become witnesses to a massive con. And I was already on my way back to the truth, carrying a full set of legal documents that would force them to finally face the consequences they never thought would catch up to them. I left Forest Pines Resort just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The wind off the river felt colder than usual, cutting through my thin jacket. I didn't go back to my mother's house. I didn't return to the hotel either. I drove straight to the house that used to be mine, 1247 Lakeshore Avenue, the one they thought they had successfully sold. The house stood quietly, almost as if it had been waiting for me. The old moss stains on the porch steps were still there, the ones I had tried to scrub away when I first moved in. The second-floor windows hadn't been replaced and the lock was still the one I installed 5 years ago. The code hadn't changed. I stood at the door for a few seconds, then entered the code. A soft click sounded. The door swung open and that familiar scent of aged wood washed over me. I flipped on the lights and stepped into the living room, the spot where I once placed the couch I bought during the winter clearance sale after my first promotion. I sat down on the floor, leaned back against the wall, and finally allowed myself to breathe. Emotions cracked open like shattered glass. Anger, sadness, the old pain I thought I had buried, they all came crashing back like storm waves. I remembered that afternoon when I was 18, right after my biological father's funeral. I was still wearing that black dress a size too big, sitting on the back steps of the house. My mom walked over holding a stack of papers. I just spoke to the lawyer. We need to temporarily transfer the house title to your aunt's name, to handle some paperwork. You can take it back anytime. I looked at her with tear-streaked eyes. I didn't ask questions. Didn't doubt. I just signed. Because I trusted her. Because I thought I had just lost my father and my mom was the only one I had left. Years went by and the deed to the house was never returned to me. Every time I asked, she'd say, "You're living in the city now, don't worry. The house is still yours." But I knew, if there's one thing I learned from working in investment, it's this. An asset is not really yours unless your name, or your legal entity's name, is on it. So when I turned 30, I quietly created a separate company, Cedar Ridge LC, structured as a limited liability real estate investment firm. Everything was legal, transparent, with an office address separate from where I lived or worked. And one fall day 3 years ago, I transferred ownership of 1247 Lakeshore to Cedar Ridge. No one knew. I didn't tell my mother. Didn't mention it to Frank. Definitely kept Chloe in the dark. They all thought the house was still under my name. It never occurred to them to check public records. Maybe they believed I'd never feel the need to protect myself from them. That was their biggest mistake. When I got the email from the bank confirming the sale transaction, something felt off. But when Adam sent me a copy of the power of attorney document, with a shaky, forged signature, I nearly slammed my keyboard in rage. On paper, they claimed I was undergoing long-term psychological treatment and incapable of managing personal property. They attached a medical certificate, with a blurry stamp and the signature of a doctor who, as it turned out, doesn't exist, at least not in the state's medical database. Fake signature. Fake documents. Fake identity. But they didn't know that they used those forged papers to sell a property that I no longer legally owned. The asset belonged to Cedar Ridge LLC, a completely independent legal entity. And under Oregon state law, falsifying documents to sell property owned by a company, especially without legal authorization from its representative, constitutes serious financial fraud. This was no longer just a family dispute. This was criminal. I stood up and walked around the house. Every room echoed with memories. The kitchen still had the open layout. The small dining table under the window still bore the scratches from the birthday party I threw for myself when I turned 29. The wooden cabinet in the bedroom still held the only photo I had of my father, framed neatly and set on the bookshelf. I took out my phone and called Adam. The house is untouched. No sign of forced entry. Makes sense. The freeze order hasn't come through yet, but the real estate firm is still waiting for the buyer's payment to clear. The funds haven't been released. Greg's trying to delay things, hoping to cover their tracks. And Greg, I cut in, he definitely knew I didn't sign that paper. But he helped them anyway. We'll include him as a civil co-conspirator, Adam replied. I've already pulled internal emails from Cascade Realty. There's a thread between Greg and Frank discussing expedited paperwork to avoid discovery. I chuckled. They dug their own grave. Adam was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Are you okay, Peyton?" "I'm fine," I said. "It just feels strange, knowing I was right to protect myself from them. But it still hurts that I had to." He didn't respond right away, then said softly, "Some wounds only heal once we stop pretending they aren't there." I sat down on the wooden chair, my hands covering my face. For a second, I imagined what life would be like if my father were still alive. But he had left too soon, leaving me in the hands of people I once called family. Now the masks were falling off. And they were about to find out what happens when the daughter they thought would stay silent forever finally speaks up. I left the Lakeshore house just before midnight. A light rain had started to fall, droplets tapping gently on the windshield like a quiet warning. I drove back to the small hotel in town. No music, no radio. My mind was focused on one thing. This was the beginning. The next morning, I sat in a cafe right across from City Hall. A small wooden table, a slowly cooling cappuccino beside my open laptop. I opened my email, attached all the legal documents proving Cedar Ridge LLC's ownership of the house, along with the fake transaction papers Adam had sent me the night before. I drafted a short letter with clear, concise language, but fully grounded in legal terms. To Cascade Realty Company. I am the executive director of Cedar Ridge LLC, the legal owner of the property located at 1247 Lakeshore Avenue. I have learned that your company has proceeded with the sale of this property based on forged documents and a falsified identity. I demand that your company immediately cease all disbursement procedures, halt the transfer of ownership, and provide all transaction records to support an ongoing investigation. Forging documents to sell property belonging to a separate legal entity may constitute a serious criminal offense under Oregon state law. If your company fails to respond within 24 hours, I will file a lawsuit in court and report this to the Oregon Real Estate Regulatory Commission. Sincerely, Peyton Walker, Director, Cedar Ridge LLC. I hit send. Right after that, I forwarded the same package of documents to all the related parties whose contact information I had gathered from Chloe's social media. The florist, the event planning company, the venue, the live band, the sound equipment rental company, and a wedding planner named Naomi Ray. Someone Chloe had once bragged about, saying, "I got a discount because we're tight." In the email, I didn't use hostile language. I simply laid out the facts calmly. The transaction involved forged documents, a property not legally owned by the seller, and there's a high possibility that any payments received by vendors might be reversed once a financial freeze is issued by the bank. An hour later, I got my first reply. "We have halted all services for the wedding of Ms. Chloe Gill. Please send over any legal documentation should you need cooperation for the investigation. Thank you for the warning." Then came the second, third, fourth message. With every notification sound, I felt a strange sense of relief slowly flood through my body. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a moment. I didn't want to pick up, but I didn't want to run either. I answered. "Peyton." Her voice was hoarse, clearly from crying. "Please don't do this. You're ruining your sister's happiness." I closed my eyes and leaned back in the chair. "No, Mom. I'm not ruining anything. I'm stopping a fraud. Chloe's falling apart. She said all the vendors are canceling. The florist, the caterer, even the band. People keep calling nonstop. She said her fiancé is starting to get suspicious." "And what do you think I should do?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Stay quiet. Look the other way. You know, she just wanted a proper wedding. It's not like she used the money to gamble or anything." I clenched my fist. "She got that money by impersonating her own sister, Mom. No matter what it was for, it was wrong. It was illegal." My mother's voice dropped to a whisper. "Peyton, I just thought, you have money, you're doing well, and Chloe's never had anything. I thought, if you shared a little, what harm could it do?" I let out a slow breath. "I already shared, Mom. I gave you back the house. I paid off Frank's car. I paid Chloe's college tuition. For years. $217,000. I never mentioned it. Never complained. But that doesn't mean I didn't see it." Silence stretched for nearly a minute. Then she spoke quietly, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Peyton, it was you all this time?" I didn't answer. I just said softly but clearly, "You didn't just let me be used. You participated." I hung up. I sat there in a small cafe, the hum of the espresso machine in the background, my heart pounding like it was about to burst. But for the first time in years, I let the anger pass through me. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I only felt one thing with absolute clarity. I had stepped out of the toxic circle called sacrifice for family. And from now on, I wasn't going back. The next morning, I woke up at 6 without an alarm. Not because I had rested well, I had barely slept, but because my mind had become a battlefield, every thought racing but strangely focused. I made myself a black coffee, sat by the hotel window looking out at the slowly awakening town, as the streetlights faded under the early sun. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank accounts, and disabled every recurring payment I had set up over the years. Mortgage support, disabled. Frank's car insurance, disabled. My mother's credit card bill, disabled. Remaining tuition support for Chloe, disabled. In total, $3,200 per month. Over the past 4 years, I had spent more than $150,000 on my family, without a single thank you, without anyone asking if I was okay. After cutting the funds, I submitted a formal request to the bank. Revoke all third-party auto payment access to both my personal and business accounts. Then I straightened up in my chair, took a deep breath, and called Adam. He picked up on the first ring. "Are you ready for the next step?" he asked, his voice calm and steady as usual. "I've shut down all outgoing payments. If they haven't noticed yet, they will soon." "They may already be catching on." Adam paused. "I have news." I put down my coffee. "Go on." Wells Pacific Bank just flagged a suspicious loan application for $100,000 under your name. The reason they sent the case to us is because the file uses your old Portland address and your original social security number, not the revised one tied to Cedar Ridge. I froze. They used my info from college? Exactly. Old email, old phone number. And here's the kicker. A scanned student application from Washington State University. A document only one person could have kept. I closed my eyes. "Linda, My mother had been the one to collect and file away all my records back when I was in college. She said she was keeping them, in case Peyton ever lost anything. I'd asked for them back a few times, but she always claimed they were stored in the attic. I used to think it was just disorganized. Now I realized it was premeditated. There's even a signature, Adam continued. Completely forged, but close enough to pass the first verification stage. I've already asked the bank to preserve the file and send it directly to us for evidence. A loan application for $100,000, I repeated slowly. And you said Wells Pacific was which bank in the timeline? The second one. 3 days earlier, a similar application was submitted to West Point Union. It was rejected because they couldn't verify the collateral. I bit my lip. And I'm guessing the person who represented me was Frank? Exactly. He claimed he had power of attorney from his daughter because she lives abroad. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. They really thought I'd never find out. I've just finished drafting the identity theft complaint, Adam said. We'll submit it to both the police department and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Once this triggers a broader investigation, every financial transaction under your name will be placed under close review. Any similar application, even those still being processed at other banks, will be frozen immediately. Do it. I clenched my fist. Don't let a single one slip through. Adam paused for a beat. Peyton, once you file an identity theft report, this stops being a family matter. It becomes a criminal offense. A felony. This means prison time. I know. Are you sure you're ready for that? I looked out the window. An elderly couple was walking their dog slowly under the awning. The sky was gently gray, but no rain fell. I spent my entire youth keeping this family afloat, I said quietly. I paid the bills. I protected them from creditors, from the outside world, even from themselves. But they didn't want a daughter. They wanted a sponsor. And when I stopped giving, they decided to steal. I paused before continuing. This isn't revenge. I'm just stopping them. Adam stayed silent for a long moment. I understand. After we ended the call, I reopened my email and began drafting each report to the federal agencies. Every name I typed into the suspect field felt like striking my own chest with each keystroke. Frank Gill, Linda Gill, Chloe Gill. I never thought I'd write those 3 names into a criminal complaint. But I also never thought they'd do something like this to me. By late morning, I received confirmation from Wells Pacific that the loan application in my name had been officially denied, and Frank's personal account at the bank had been flagged for investigation. I closed my laptop. My back ached, but my heart felt lighter. The first message came from someone I hadn't heard from in over 6 years. Aunt Ruth, my biological father's older sister. I still remembered her face at my dad's funeral. She was the only one who stood with me in the pouring rain, holding a tiny umbrella over my head from the cemetery to the car while my mother rushed off because she had lunch plans with the pastor. After the funeral, Aunt Ruth never called again. I understood. Back then, my mom told me to stop contacting my father's side of the family. They never liked me, and I don't want you caught in between, she said. And I was too young not to obey. Aunt Ruth's message was just one line. I'm so sorry. I didn't know they treated you like that. I reread her words several times but didn't reply right away. I wasn't angry with her. It just felt strange. Because after all those years of being misunderstood, seen as cold and indifferent toward my family, the truth was finally surfacing, like a boulder rising after a flood. Not long after, another message came in. This time from Uncle Mark, my dad's youngest brother. I remembered how he once called me the star of the family when I received a full college scholarship. But I hadn't heard him say that again ever since. Peyton, if you have time, your Aunt Brenda and I would love to take you out for dinner. We want to hear the whole story directly from you. I didn't answer right away. My phone was already buzzing with dozens of alerts from local news outlets. The story about the identity fraud lawsuit had begun to spread. One headline from a local paper made me freeze. Family impersonates daughter to sell her home. Lavish wedding crumbles and scandal stirs. Within hours, Chloe Gill's name was being circulated. It started with a blog post from someone in the event planning industry, warning colleagues about an unethical client who submitted unclear financial documents and left over 10 vendors unpaid. Then came a Facebook post from an anonymous bank employee, recounting the story of an older couple trying to secure a loan using their daughter's forged documents, then throwing a tantrum when denied. And then, a video. A short clip, barely 2 minutes long, capturing my mother, Linda, screaming at me at the Forest Pines Resort when Chloe's engagement party got disrupted. Someone in the crowd had filmed it on their phone and posted it to TikTok. I could hear every word clearly. "You have money but won't help your family? You're ungrateful." The video spread fast. Within hours, her social media pages were flooded with angry comments. So, helping family means identity theft and stealing property? Unbelievable. A mother saying that to her daughter in front of strangers. The look in that girl's eyes. It's chilling and heartbreaking. I didn't comment. I didn't share the clip. But I read. I quietly read every single line, not because I wanted to see my mother publicly shamed, but because, after so many years of silence, I needed to know if anyone out there could see the truth, could tell right from wrong. As for Chloe, she vanished from social media almost instantly. The Instagram page she once filled daily with ring photos, dress fittings, and fine dining snaps was now set to private. That afternoon, I received a call from Naomi, Chloe's wedding planner. "Hi Peyton, sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know." Her voice sounded tired, no trace of the cheerful tone she once had in her YouTube clips. Tyler, Chloe's fiancé, officially called off the engagement. His family learned everything from the media, checked the financial records. And furious. I didn't say anything right away. Naomi continued, "Chloe's blaming me. Says it's all my fault for not managing the media fallout." I sighed. She'll blame anyone but herself. Naomi hesitated. "Peyton, I just wanted to say, thank you for speaking up. If you hadn't, I might have lost every contract this wedding season because of that scam." I nodded gently, even though she couldn't see it. As for Frank, Adam had just sent me an update from the bank. His mortgage extension request had been rejected. His account was now frozen pending investigation. The bank had begun issuing foreclosure warnings, 60 days to settle past dues or lose the house. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty. The man who once stood proudly at my high school graduation, patting my shoulder in front of everyone and saying, "You are the pride of this family," was now facing the very real possibility of losing the home I once helped him save. I clearly remember covering more than 8 months of mortgage payments for them back in 2020, when Frank lost his job due to the pandemic. He called me close to midnight, his voice hoarse, saying he couldn't let your mother find out about this. And yet here he was, using my name to falsify loan documents. I looked over the numbers in my bank account. Everything was still intact. Cedar Ridge was still running. I still had the means to live decently, to work, and to protect what I had built. Only one thing no longer meant the same as it used to: the idea of family. Relatives I thought had stopped caring were now the first to reach out with apologies. People who used to say, "Peyton is distant, cold, and disconnected from her bloodline," were now texting me saying they used to believe everything Linda said, that I had cut ties out of arrogance, that I had abandoned my mother and sister because I thought I was better than them. I don't blame them. I just believe that when the truth is clear and undeniable enough, it will eventually find its way through. And now the mask they wore, funded by my earnings, upheld by my sacrifices, had fallen. And they began to realize that some people don't walk away from their families. They are pushed out long ago simply for having loved too deeply for too long without being loved in return. The hearing was held on a Monday morning in the crisp November chill of Chicago. I sat in the front row wearing a charcoal gray suit, my hair tied neatly back, eyes steady and unwavering. Across from me sat Frank, Linda, and Chloe. All three had their heads down, occasionally stealing glances at me, as if they still couldn't believe I had actually brought all of this into the light. The Cook County courtroom was so silent you could hear the soft flipping of paper. Presiding over the case was Judge Rosen, a woman in her 60s, stern but not cold. She read the summary of charges aloud in a clear, firm voice. The plaintiff, Ms. Peyton Sanders, accuses the defendants, Mr. Frank Sanders and Mrs. Linda Sanders, of unlawfully using her personal information to submit fraudulent loan applications totaling a requested amount of $100,000, and for carrying out real estate transactions without her legal consent. The third defendant, Chloe Sanders, is under investigation for potential complicity in the fraudulent use of assets. I raised my head and looked directly at the man who once called himself my father, but who now couldn't even meet my eyes. Representing me was Adam, a friend I had never expected to become such a pivotal figure during this chapter of my life. He presented all the evidence on my behalf: bank statements, email correspondence, a scanned copy of the house deed, everything they had used as false collateral to attempt loans from 2 banks. Then we called our first witness. Please call Mr. David Thompson. David, a loan officer at Maple Oak Bank, entered in a sharp navy suit and silver-rimmed glasses. He spoke clearly and precisely. On August 15th, I received a loan application under the name Peyton Sanders. However, during verification, I noticed several inconsistencies. The email address was a Yahoo account that didn't match the one we had on file. Also, the phone number listed was a prepaid mobile, commonly used as a temporary contact. Judge Rosen nodded. How did you respond? I reached out to the official email we had verified back when Ms. Peyton was in college. She, the real Peyton, replied stating she had never submitted any loan application. I immediately forwarded the file to our internal investigation unit. Adam added, we would also like to call Notary Public Margaret Ellis, listed in the real estate sale agreement submitted to the brokerage, to confirm the authenticity of the signature. An older woman stepped up to the stand, holding a thick folder and adjusting the reading glasses on her nose. Yes, I can confirm I never notarized anything for either of these individuals this year. The signature is forged. The seal was illegally copied from a document that had been stolen earlier. I kept my hands from trembling, though my heart raced. I wasn't someone who liked lawsuits. But when your name, assets, and reputation are used to finance a wedding you weren't even invited to, silence becomes complicity. When my family's attorney rose to argue, they tried to deflect. Your Honor, my clients Frank and Linda Sanders did not intend to commit fraud. They believed they were simply managing assets that were part of the family's collective property. Judge Rosen looked up. Do you have any legal authorization or power of attorney? No, Your Honor. But if you don't have one, you don't have one. Nobody, accidentally, submits an entire fake loan application. She then turned to Chloe, who sat further back, her face pale and devoid of her usual smugness. Chloe Sanders, we have evidence that you signed a contract with a wedding planner valued at over $60,000, with payment linked to an account owned by Ms. Peyton Sanders. Do you have anything to say? Chloe mumbled, eyes glassy. I was just following Mom's instructions. She said she'd take care of the legal stuff. Judge Rosen interrupted. You are legally an adult. Following Mom's instructions does not exempt you from accountability. You assisted in using funds tied to a forged transaction. You have the right to remain silent, but your statement today will be part of the ongoing investigation record. The courtroom was still. None of them looked at me. Not one expression of remorse. Only Linda, my own mother, murmured, Peyton, you didn't have to do this. We're family. I replied calmly, family doesn't give anyone the right to destroy another person's name and life, Mom. Judge Rosen lowered her gavel. Based on the evidence presented today, I find the actions of Mr. Frank Sanders and Mrs. Linda Sanders consistent with fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The case will be forwarded to the State Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Chloe Sanders is hereby ordered to cooperate in the ongoing civil investigation. The trial ended. But my battle was far from over. By late afternoon, headlines were already circulating. Young businesswoman sues her own parents for fraud to fund sister's lavish wedding. Daughter exposes family's deception. Court confirms fraud and identity theft orchestrated by parents and sister. In a brief interview I agreed to with a local news station, I said only one thing. I didn't sue for the money. I sued because staying silent in the past cost me too much of myself. And I'm not staying silent. People who once called me ungrateful began to see me differently. I wasn't looking for their regret. I just knew that even when truth hurts, it's the only foundation from which someone can live as their true self. And I chose the truth. I left Chicago on a foggy morning. The mist didn't just blur the highway to the airport. It was like the very weight I was leaving behind. The resentment, the sorrow, the years of emotional strain. As the plane lifted off the ground, I didn't look back. I knew I was flying toward freedom, not to escape but to come home. Seattle greeted me with a chilly afternoon drizzle, like a quiet reminder that this city was once my beginning, long before I became the ungrateful daughter in the eyes of others. The small apartment I used to rent was still vacant. The landlord had even left a handwritten note. If Ms. Peyton returns, we're happy to offer her a long-term lease. I smiled. Not everyone turns their back. Not everyone forgets. Just a few days after settling into my new rhythm, I received an invitation from a widely followed podcast channel, Break the Cycle, which focuses on ending toxic family dynamics. The host was Camila Harris, a woman in her early 40s who had gone through her own journey of cutting ties with a controlling mother. Her voice was warm, just enough to make me feel safe, not pitted. The recording took place in a small studio in Capitol Hill. Camila looked at me from behind the studio glass and signaled that we were live. Hello, listeners. Today we'll be hearing the story of a woman who courageously stood up not just to reclaim her legal ownership, but her voice. I took a deep breath and spoke honestly. I used to believe that staying silent was the only way to keep the peace in a family. But peace can't exist when only one side is doing all the enduring. I told my story, from discovering the house had been sold, the quiet phone calls from my mother, my sister using my name to fund her extravagant wedding, to the moment I stepped into the courtroom and faced them. Camila never interrupted, but I heard her sigh softly through the mic. When the recording ended, she came into the room and hugged me for a long moment. Thank you for speaking out. So many people will find strength from your story. 2 days later, the episode aired. My inbox flooded with messages. Thank yous, shared stories, even unexpected apologies from people I hadn't heard from in years. And then I received an email from the court in Chicago. Frank Sanders was sentenced to 18 months in prison for property fraud and identity theft. Linda Sanders was placed under supervised probation for 12 months and required to attend community-based counseling. Chloe Sanders was ordered to pay a civil restitution of $62,000 for unauthorized use of my assets. I didn't feel triumphant. It was simply a confirmation that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't ungrateful, and I didn't deserve the labels they had pinned on me. A week later, I returned to the house in Illinois. It had officially been transferred back to Cedar Ridge LLC, the small real estate company I founded 5 years ago. I didn't need to use a fake name or authorize a third party. I walked straight in with a freshly printed key, stepping slowly across the aging wooden floor. The house still smelled the same: old book dust, damp wood, and somewhere faint traces of memory. I stood in the living room and touched the window frame my mother had once painted over in thick white. The paint was now peeling. This used to be my home, I whispered. And now it's something I'm letting go. I decided to sell the house. But before I did, I wanted to fix it up. One last time. Not to cling to it, but to give it a proper ending before I sent it into the past. And I saw Jack again. Jack and I had gone to college together at the University of Seattle, both studying architecture. We had once collaborated on a project about healing spaces, personalized designs that help people process trauma through their environment. Back then, I had admired how he used design as a language for emotion. Now, I needed that exact thing, not for myself but for the house that had witnessed both my love and betrayal. Jack arrived on a Saturday morning. Same old pickup truck, same khaki jacket and dusty boots. Except now his hair had streaks of gray and his eyes had softened with time. Peyton, he smiled, still remember how to make coffee? I laughed. If you still remember how to curve a drafting ruler, I still remember how to use a French press. We spent 3 days measuring, updating floor plans, pulling up old wood panels, replacing window frames, and repainting every wall. Jack refused payment. He only asked for a dinner once we were done. I nodded. That evening, as the new lights cast soft glows on the fresh wood panels, Jack and I sat on the front steps, each holding a glass of wine. You know, I said, staring out at the fog-covered front lawn, as a kid I used to think this place would last forever. But it turns out family isn't about where you live. It's about where you get to be yourself. Jack nodded. And what you just built from the wreckage, it's beautiful because it was rebuilt with truth, not pretense. I didn't respond. I just held my glass a little tighter as if sealing away a chapter that had finally closed. Peacefully. I woke to a quiet morning, the kind where mist hangs like a sheer veil over the entire neighborhood in North Seattle. The scent of fresh coffee from the cafe down the street mixed with the soft hum of traffic, lulling me into a calm I hadn't known in years. In my tiny apartment with just one window facing the pine woods, I curled up in the armchair, a wool scarf wrapped around my shoulders, laptop in my lap. My inbox displayed a subject line that read simply, "Sister, it happened to me too." I opened it. The email came from an unfamiliar address. No name. Just a few short lines. "My name is HL. I'm 22. I heard your story on the podcast last week. My parents used my name to take out loans, then told me it was for the family. Thought I was crazy. I thought I was selfish. But because of you, I understand now that it wasn't my fault. I just wanted to say, thank you for speaking up." I sat still. Not because I was surprised, but because my heart had started beating to a different rhythm. The rhythm you feel when you realize your pain is not alone. I once thought my story was just one tragic thread, one private misfortune. But it turns out there are children everywhere, silent, compliant, and forced to sacrifice under the sacred label of family duty. I replied gently and simply, "Thank you for trusting me. You are not wrong. You deserve to live as your true self. Hold on to that even if the world around you doesn't understand." After I sent it, I didn't close my laptop. I just sat there staring at the screen where my reflection showed faintly, the same side profile my mother used to say looked stubborn like your father. Now I know sometimes that stubbornness is the only thing that keeps us standing in a storm. The phone on my table buzzed. A notification appeared. Real estate company sent the transfer agreement for the Cedar Ridge house. I inhaled deeply, pulled down the PDF file and read line by line. The house had a buyer, a young couple who had just welcomed their first baby girl. They said they wanted a quiet space, a front yard for flowers, and an attic with enough sunlight for a reading room. I smiled. Something in me warmed up. The house where I had cried the most was about to become a place where a child would laugh. I no longer blamed that house. It had only been a witness, never the villain. I signed the contract. The pen trembled slightly in my hand, not from fear but from emotion. Once I finished, I set the pen down and looked up at the sky, clearing after the night's rain. Then I picked up my phone. One by one, I opened each contact and deleted it. Frank Sanders, deleted. Linda Sanders, deleted. Chloe Sanders, deleted. There was no anger. No tears. Just a clear decision. I didn't need fake apologies. I didn't need to maintain a relationship just for the sake of having a family. The people who truly cared about me, they were still here. In the anonymous messages filled with empathy. In Jack's eyes as we removed each weathered plank of wood. In Camila's voice when she hugged me after the recording. And in myself, when I finally learned to trust my own voice. I stepped out onto the balcony. The sun had just begun to rise. Light streamed through the breaking clouds, touching the dew-covered pine trees. That morning, Seattle felt gentler than it ever had. I took out my phone, opened the Notes app, and typed a simple line. I chose myself. And I don't regret it. Just a few words, but they carried the weight of an entire journey. I thought about the children called difficult, simply because they refused to obey without question. I thought about the sons and daughters accused of being ungrateful simply for daring to protect themselves. I thought about the girl named HL, someone I've never met, stepping out of the shadows just because she heard a story like hers. And I realized, I hadn't just fought for justice for myself. I had added a voice, small but necessary, for everyone trying to break free from the seemingly unbreakable cycle of toxic family ties. I went back inside and made myself another cup of tea. No coffee. No rush. For the first time, I could enjoy a quiet morning cup of tea without my heart racing from fear. I had chosen my own path, and I would keep walking it one steady step at a time. Not for revenge. Not to prove anything. But simply because I know I deserve to live as myself. If you've ever felt something similar, when the very people you called family were the ones who pushed you into the dark, when loyalty was twisted into a debt you could never fully repay, share your story. I know it's not easy to speak up, but maybe someone out there needs to hear your truth to find the strength to stand up. I'm not telling this journey to relive the pain, but to remind us all that love does not mean blind obedience. Blood does not excuse harm. And we all have the right to set boundaries, even with the ones who gave us life. If this story touched a part of your memory or your heart, don't hesitate to leave your thoughts. Every word you share might be a ray of light for someone still lost in the dark. And if you're drawn to stories about family, about pain, healing, and sometimes the journey of letting go in order to begin again, follow this channel to explore more of the quiet but deeply honest corners of life with me. Because sometimes, in the most personal stories, we find ourselves.